Okay, we are going to be talking about banks and money creation today. Have a couple definitions of things that we need to make sure we understand. First, a fractional reserve banking system is a system where banks only need to hold a portion of all deposits that they receive. And that is the system or the method that our banks in the United States use. When banks are using that system, they are only required to hold a portion of deposits, and the amount that they are required to hold is what we call the required reserve ratio. And that number is set by the Federal Reserve. Typically for our banks, it's about 10%, which means every time a deposit goes into a bank, banks only need to hold on to 10% of each deposit. And last, we're going to be talking about the idea of money creation. Money creation is just the money that a bank creates through loans. And anytime loans are given out, we say that that is an increase to the money supply. Add that here. This is an increase to the money supply. All right, so we're going to go through an example really quick of how this money creation process works. So when we do this, we create a balance sheet. And a balance sheet is going to look something like this, where we are comparing a bank's liabilities and a bank's assets. So it's important for us to know that liabilities are really all of the things that a bank owes somebody else. We're going to put here bank owes. And assets are going to be all the things that a bank owns. Your bank owns. And that's how we kind of keep track of what assets and what liabilities are. So we're going to say in our example that this bank receives $100 as a deposit. Deposits are always going to be recorded as a liability. So we'll put deposit as a liability, and in this scenario, this bank has received $100. And then because this is a balance sheet, whatever shows up as a liability must also show up as an asset. And so I am going to then have to figure out where that $100 is going to go as assets to our bank. So the first place that a deposit always goes is required reserves. So I'm going to put here required reserves, and $10 of our deposit is going to go into required reserves. And that tells us that our required reserve ratio for this scenario, required reserve ratio, is going to be equal to 10%. And that means that in this scenario, the bank is going to hold on to 10% of all deposits. The rest of that deposit is going to go into what we call excess reserves. So that would be $90. Because again, this is a balance sheet, so all deposits that come in have to show up somewhere as assets. The balance sheet has to be in balance. Okay? Now, currently, this bank has not loaned out any money. So I'm going to put here that loans are $0. So we would say then that there has been zero increase to the money supply. But this bank has the ability or the potential to increase the money supply by $90 because that's what they have available in their excess reserves. So let's say that someone comes along and they want to borrow money from this bank. This bank has $90 available that they can loan out. And we're going to make some changes to our balance sheet. We're going to say that $90 is borrowed. And so that's going to change the balance sheet and make it so excess reserves are going to be equal to 0. And now our loans are going to be equal to $90. Now this bank has increased the money supply by $90 because there are $90 available in the economy that were not previously available. The last thing that I think is important for us to know is anytime a deposit comes into a bank, that deposit must be split up. First, a certain percentage needs to go into required reserves, and after that, the remainder of the deposit shows up as excess reserves, and that is the money that a bank has that's available to them to loan out.